In this video I'm going to be building a second sleeper pond. It's going to be similar to this one, a little bit smaller, but built essentially the same. Instead of 2 sleepers high, it'll be 3 sleepers high. This is the position it's going in. 1.5 meters squared will be the internal diameter. This is my old pond. The fish are going to be coming out of here and moving into the new one. This has been here a couple of years now. It's got 25 fancy goldfish in there. It's about 1,000 litres. The new one we're going to be building is about 1,500 litres. It's been a nice pond, it's had its day. Going to get started by cutting the first 4 sleepers to set down. These are 1,700 and 1,500. The first thing I wanted to do is move the sleepers about, get them in a rough position so I know exactly where it was I wanted the pond to go. And once they were in place and I was happy with them, it was time to level the surface. I wasn't digging down too much, only a few inches really, just to for the layer of gravel that's going in. I was just flattening it off, and as you can see, I chose a great set of trainers. I did more skidding about in the mud than I did digging, but we got there in the end. Once I was happy with the bottom being level, I then removed the sleepers. I levelled up the ground underneath the sleepers and got it as flat as possible. The next stage I chose to put builder's sand underneath them. It just gives them a little bit of extra protection. I'm not going to be in this house too long, so I mean I've built this on a budget. I mean my advice would be, if you are planning it for a real long-term pond, I would go over concrete base, to be honest, but I mean I was building this on a budget, so I went with a builder sand. Once all the sand was down and I was happy with it being as level as possible, I then got the sleepers back on top. I mean, the first layer is the most important. You've really got to work hard at getting them as level as you possibly can. Once they're level and they're solid, you know, all the next ones going on top, it makes it a hell of a lot easier. I secured them on the inside with these quite heavy duty stainless steel brackets in the corner. I did end up putting these on each overlap as well to hold each sleeper to the next sleeper, and then I used hex bolts on the outside to fix them all in place, and you know the end result is a real solid base. Once that first layer is in, it's just a case of repeating the process really, cutting the wood to the right length, putting the sleepers on top, making sure it's level, using the hex bolts to get them all in place. It's like building blocks really. It's quite easy. It's what makes these sleeper ponds of this size anyway quite easy. Once you go above the length of a sleeper, which is normally about 2.4 meters, you know, it gets a bit more complicated. But if you keep it under that, it really is quite simple. The other pond I showed you at the start, I mean that was 2.4 meters by 2.4, and this one's slightly smaller, but you know it's exactly the same principle. When using these hex bolts, it does make it easier drilling a pilot hole first, through the first sleeper. Don't go into the sleeper you're drilling into, because obviously it needs to take hold, but yeah, do the pilot hole first. It makes it a hell of a lot getting it in there. So that's the second layer in, just one more to go. I decided on going 3 high because I mean at the 1.5 meters by 1.5 internally, it comes to about 14 or 1500 litres. Like everyone, I did consider digging down and going high, because you like to try and get it as big as possible, don't you, as much volume. But as there was fancy goldfish going in there, they can have bladder issues, and apparently when it's too deep it can cause more issue with the bladder. So I ended up, you know, staying with the 3 sleeper high, about 1500 litres. I mean, it made it easier because I didn't have to do any digging. So I mean, that's the advantage of these sleeper ponds. If you don't dig down, you just come up. You know, it really does save you back for the digging and getting rid of all the earth. So that's the top row going in now. Almost done, just got screwing in with the hex bolts. Internally I ended up securing each sleeper to the other with these heavy duty brackets. It doesn't show them all there, but I did put some extra ones in and filled the bottom with sand and levelled that off. At this point I did forget to do some recording, so this is the Ring doorbell at the back. This is putting the pond underlay in. I cut it to size, and what I do with the sleepers is I use a bit of silicone to stick it to the edge, because when you're putting the pond liner in, it can move around quite a lot. You want it to stay in place. I mean, that's how I end up doing it. It works quite well. So that's the pond underlay in. The next is the liner to go in. I did miss putting the liner into the pond, so we jumped forward to the liner being in, trimmed around the sides, and the water's in, and it's just a case of trying to tidy it up at this point. Putting the pond liner in is one of the most difficult jobs I find. I mean, getting the corners right and getting it looking good, it is a tough job. I'm not particularly good at it. I mean, I've only done it a few times. I do recommend watching a number of YouTube videos to try and get it right. I don't worry about it too much because I have a lot of plants in the pond. It tends to really hide it and cover it up, but you know, if you're having quite a kind of neutral pond with nothing in there, so it's easy to clean, and it's on show, I do recommend, you know, trying to do a better job than I did. And as that water's going in, you gradually want to try and mess around with the liner and try and get it as best you can, and once you're happy with it, I mean, I go around and put a load of staples in there to hold it in place. Once your staples are all in place and you're happy with it, it's time to trim around the outside and get it as close to that edge as you can. You need a good sharp pair of scissors here. I mean, getting through the liner is quite easy. It's that underlay that can be quite tough to get through. I mean, you can do it with a Stanley knife as well. It's whatever you prefer, really. That's the liner all trimmed up. The water's topped up as high as I like it to go. It's starting to look like a pond now. It's looking quite nice. I really like that weeping willow behind the back. That's really nice, that is. Yeah, so I decided to go with a bed of gravel at the bottom. I mean, you don't have to do this. I like to do it because it adds increased surface area for beneficial bacteria. It can pick up dirt, but I mean, I try and create as natural an environment as possible, and I like having that gravel in the bottom. I think it looks nicer than having a just, you know, the liner at the bottom. I think it ended up being about 3 or 4 bags of gravel. See, I cleaned it all first thoroughly, otherwise, you know, you whack it all in there and it just clouds up the pond, and then you've got to clear all out once the filter gets going. But yeah, just chuck it in evenly. Did about a 10 or 15 mil layer at the bottom. So I put the same gravel in the other sleeper pond, and the koi tend to keep it relatively clean, really, but they're all digging through it. So I've got a number of plants to move in from the other ponds just to get this one going, because I mean, these will all have beneficial bacteria already on them. So I mean, placing them in the pond, you know, it gives it a bit of a kickstart, really. And what I end up doing is putting a couple of plants in. I then add a couple of goldfish in there and leave it about a week just to get, you know, to get it all settled, to let the water settle. The sleepers are 100 mil thick, so I wanted something to go over the top that kind of matched the colour of the sleepers and the wood pattern. but also overlaps slightly. So I mean, I think this is a decking. I think it was 125mm wide. It's overlapped it slightly on both sides. And used a bit of silicone along the edges, and then screwed down. I think there's one screw in the middle and one at each end. That's really coming on now. It looks like a pond now. It's been left a week. The water's settled, so the next thing to do was just do a few tests, make sure the water's okay, and it's time to move the new fish in, or move the filter over. Actually, you've got to move the filter over, get that set up, and then the fish can go in. Now, this filter's been running for about 2 or 3 years now, so you know it's a mature filter. So if I can move it over quickly, it doesn't dry out, and get it onto that new pond. You know, you shouldn't have this new pond syndrome, especially when adding plants and all that at the same time as well. You know, the hope is I don't get no new pond syndrome. This is a Wix 100 litre water barrel. These filters are a little different. I mean, they've got 50 litres of alpha grog in there. They've got gravel in there, and there's a little bit of matting at the top, but not a lot. They're a bit different. I mean, there's no mechanical filtration. I see it on a YouTube video. I mean, I clean them out a couple of times a year. You just leave them. And as you can see, the water coming out of there now it's absolutely filthy. But they work. They work. I mean, I use these on both the ponds, and I've never had any issues whatsoever. I mean, look at the dirt on my hand there. I mean, they are disgusting when you clean them out. I mean, I clean the top of them out a little bit, but I give them a good kind of clean once or twice a year. That's it. I mean, there is a tap at the bottom, so you just drain out the dirt, you know, once a week. So I've drained a few 100 litres of the water out, just, you know, getting it through that filter and getting as much of that dirt out as possible, not allowing it to get in the pond. So I'm now going to plug it back in again, get the water going through, get a bucket on there and catch that last little bit of dirt. And if you have a look in there now, it is still dirty. They never look particularly clean. I mean, some of you are probably looking at it and thinking, bloody hell, look at the state of that. But like I said, they seem to work. What tends to happen with them, once they get running a little bit, you'll have clear water coming out of the top, and all that residue you see now, that settles down to the bottom, and what you'll have, you'll get a dirty layer build up at the top of the filter, and you can just clean that off. I mean, I've got a kind of hose that I use, a pond cleaner. I clean the top of it every few weeks. I don't touch underneath it, I just leave it, just clean that top layer off. Yeah, and it works great. As you can see, the water's cleared up now. That water coming out's crystal clear now. It's settled down, and the pond hasn't got murky at all. You know, it's now time to top it back up. This water's coming from the old pond where the fish are coming from, so I want to get as much as that old water in there as possible. It just helps with the transfer. Now the water's topped up and she's running as she should do. It's time to get some of these old plants in. I've got about 4 or 5 to transfer over from the old pond. I'm going to use them to cover up, you know, the ducting on the filter as much as possible. What I do with these plants is when you buy them from the you know, your local dealership, they come in the 1 litre pots, and I just screw them to the side of the decking, you know, and they rest nicely against the liner, and it works quite well. I did it on the old pond, and it works really well. I found this log on my travels, so I picked that up and thought I'd screw that to the end of the pond. I mean, that can the insects like making a home in there. They can fall into the pond. The fish can eat them. That's all the plants in. It's really coming together now. It's looking quite nice. The next stage is to cover up this filter. I just use the same pots that I used to cover it up before on the old pond. So I'll move all these into place. The ferns, I believe, they do quite a good job of covering up that filter because it is a bit of an eyesore. And I think we're finally at that stage now. It's pretty much completed. It's just a case of putting the fish in there. I've already done a previous video showing all the fish that went in there, so I'll show a couple of the fish that have gone in. So I'm going to fast forward a few months now to show you what the pond looks like after a few months growth. You can see the plants have come on. They've come on really well. They're looking fantastic, and the fish are doing really well. I mean, they're flourishing really. That weeping willow has grown quite a lot as well. It's looking quite nice. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it encourages you to build a similar pond in your garden.